The dog is prepared. We have our book, and I'll let you guys listen. Here we go. I'm going to turn you sideways, and that's just my chair. So, which is a really bad picture of it, but you know, it's what happens. We'll try it this way. Ooh, there's the book. Who knows what you can see? Anyway, we're going to read about Marxism. Okay. So, section 1, a zombie worldview back from the dead. It's not a movie we'd recommend, but the opening sequence of Shaun of the Dead, a cult classic zombie flick, is pretty revealing. Set to an upbeat carnival tune, each brief scene features people shuffling along, blankly staring ahead, checking their cell phones, just going through the motions. The filmmaker's argument is whimsically clear. If zombies invaded today, we'd have a hard time picking them out. Just about everyone seems disconnected, unthinking, and apathetic. In human history, ideas can be like zombies. When you think they're dead, they are revived, now more dangerous than before. Such is the case with Marxism and its political offshoot, communism. They're back from the dead and once again among us. Most people have a vague sense of Marxism's destructive nature. It's a good idea on paper, but it never really worked in reality, they say. Very few take Marxism seriously as a worldview. The words Marxism or communism conjure images not of fearsome military power or 100 million dead bodies, but of silly propaganda posters, ridiculous dictators who have no clue how out of step they are with the rest of the world, and clueless hippies wearing Che Guevara t-shirts. Many believe that if you can laugh at it, you don't have to think about it. That's a mistake. So what are these ideas, Marxism and communism? Very simply, Marxism is the philosophy of Karl Marx. A Marxist is someone who embraces this philosophy. Communism is the word Marx used to describe the ideal state achieved when his views are put into practice. So a communist is a person who applies Marx's ideas to the government and the economy. Communism stands in contrast to capitalism, an economic system in which private citizens own the means of production rather than the government, and in which competition and the market forces of supply and demand determine prices rather than government decree. Now, I might have lost a lot of you, but stay connected. Socialism is another key term you'll see a lot in Marxist writings and just about everywhere in society today. Marx defines socialism as the abolition of private property. Karl Marx did most of his work in the British Museum in London, where he fled when his revolutionary activities elsewhere caused whole nations to dislike him. There was a lot to dislike. Marx was a famously rude person whose unwillingness to bathe or get a haircut was legendary, as was his inattentiveness as a husband and father. And though he claimed to understand the working man, Marx never set a foot in an actual factory that we know of or made a living by physical labor. On February 21st, 1848, Marx published the Communist Manifesto with the assistance of Friedrich Engels, a young revolutionary who subsidized Marx's prodigious financial appetite with money earned, ironically, from his father's factory. After reciting the evils of factory owners, the manifesto states, "The communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Let the ruling classes tremble at a communistic revolution. The proletarians, or working class, have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Proletarians of all countries unite." The manifesto is vivid, even prosaic. Its call to violent force is chilling, especially since its fans have taken its admonitions literally for more than 150 years now, marching Marx's bloodthirsty ideas across the pages of history as surely as Alexander the Great's armies marched across Asia. When the Berlin Wall finally fell in 1989, many thought communism itself would crumble too. In quick succession, the Soviet Union and its satellite states bit the Marxist hand that promised and claimed to feed them. Yet many nations today still put their faith in communism, among them China, Cuba, and North Korea. And yet very few in the West have truly come to grips with what has happened in history when Marxists get their way. We all know about the horrors of Nazi Germany, but the slaughter of well over 100 million people by communist regimes in the 20th century seems not to have registered. Specifically, historians now estimate only as a starting point anywhere from 20 to 60 million deaths in the Soviet Union, 40 to 70 million in China, 2 million in Cambodia by the Khmer Rouge, 1.6 million in North Korea, and 1.2 million in Yugoslavia, and the slaughter continues to this day. China's one-child policy, instituted in 1971, led to 336 million abortions, many performed against the will of the parents. We know a lot about Hitler, who his girlfriend was, what kind of music he listened to, but virtually nothing about Lenin, Stalin, Mao Tse-tung, Pol Pot, or others in communism's panoply. Remarkably, communism in the 20th century killed twice the combined dead from World Wars I and II. Why the indifference? Maybe it's because, as Joseph Stalin is reported to have said, one death is a tragedy, a million is just a statistic. But these were people like you and me with hopes and dreams and memories and families who love them. It is too late to stand up for them, but we can and must honor their memory by proclaiming never again. Up against the silence surrounding communism's atrocities, the first act of healing is to speak. Qui tacit consentit, which I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, which means silence equals consent. In other words, if you don't say anything, you're agreeing. There are many reasons we should care, not the least of which is George Santayana's admonition: those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. We should also care because Marxism's evil was one of supposed virtue. Marxists reconciled themselves with evil because they believed it served an ultimate good. In history, when leaders are willing to use any means to achieve what they consider to be the ultimate good, it invariably leads to atrocity. Such is the case with Marxism. It's up to us today to see that it never happens again. As the British statesman Edmund Burke said, when bad men combine, the good must associate, else they will fall, one by one, an unpitied sacrifice in a contemptible struggle. Marxists doubtless will see our analysis as unfair and will reel off a laundry list of uncontrollable historical circumstances and the unfortunate rise of a few bad actors who they claim are truly to blame. To find out if they're right, we'll dig into the influence of Marxism today, examine its basic principles, discern what kind of worldview it is, and explore its answers to life's ultimate questions. For the most part, we'll use the words of the Marxists themselves, not their critics, to move the discussion along. First, we'll answer the question, is this even something we should still care about? And the answer to that is yes, indeedy. Section 2. Is Marxism still influential today? Nazism is a relic of the past. Sure, there are self-proclaimed Nazis out there, a handful of social misfits who favor swastikas as an angry fashion accessory. But their line of actual influence is thin, and being anti-them has in general become a rather weak cause. While we want to be alert to the rise of fascism, we need not waste time scouring the internet to see if Hitler mustaches are a growing fashion trend. Maybe Marxism and communism are like that, unpleasant but not a threat. If so, being anti-communist is a cause for embarrassment, like having a crazy uncle who sits on the front porch and hurls insults at passers-by. Many see Marxism and communism as non-threatening. Some even think it's a little cool. The image of Marxist revolutionary Che Guevara, Fidel Castro's most ruthless lieutenant and overseer of Cuba's first prison camp, La Cabana, is one of the most famous icons in the world. Hollywood has even made a movie about his private journals, The Motorcycle Diaries, to romanticize Guevara's lust for violent overthrow. But Marxism and oppression go together like peanut and butter. By its very nature, Marxism requires a radical remaking of society, wresting capital out of the hands of citizens and dismantling laws protecting private property. In far too many cases, Marxists came in as liberators, ruled as tyrants, and are remembered as criminals. Stalin's gulags, Pol Pot's killing fields, North Korea's famines, East Berlin's wall, and China's one-child policy and its millions of missing girls are only exhibits 1 through 5. Sometimes atrocities like these take decades to unfold, but the line of cause and effect eventually becomes apparent to those with eyes to see. But this still does not answer the question, are Marxism and communism relics of the past, or should we still be concerned? Let's look at two aspects of Marxism's influence: Marxism around the world and Marxism in the university. Marxism around the world. The world's 5 communist countries, China, Vietnam, Laos, North Korea, and Cuba, account for approximately 1 of every 5 people on the planet. So that's 20%. They are not, however, the only ones dealing with Marxism's implications. Socialism is the official policy of many other nations, such as Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, Portugal, Tanzania, and Guyana. If we add to that the list of countries with powerful socialist parties: France, Greece, Venezuela, Sweden, Zambia, Syria, Norway, Libya, Algeria, among others. Those that pursue socialist policies as a matter of practice, such as Zimbabwe, or those that are bent on destroying private property, it's easy to see that Karl Marx still wields power from the grave. The Communist Manifesto outlined 10 ideas, a sort of 10 commandments, that serve in some ways as a series of steps by which a society can be transitioned to communism. Read the list carefully. 1 or more of these 10 items makes the news just about every day, and some of them have been accepted in America and the West. First, abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. 2, a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. 3, abolition of all rights of inheritance. 4, confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. 5, centralization of credit in the banks of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. 6, centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of state. 7, extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, bringing wastelands into cultivation and improving the soil generally in accordance with the common plan. 8, equal obligation of all to work, establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. 9, combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of all distinctions between town and country through a more equitable distribution of the populace over the country. And 10, which always gets me, free education for all children in public schools, abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, combination of education with industrial production, and so on. These things are in the news, they just are not always worded exactly like that. So sometimes we have to be a sleuth to figure out what it is, and they do change a little bit. Marxists are convinced these steps are not only best, but will inevitably occur as more and more nations evolve to a higher state of centralized planning. The reality, of course, is much more complex. Historian Bill Federer reviewed the historical records and found that state control of the economy goes back more than 2,000 years. As Federer sees it, the development of the United States of America was an enlightened move away from the principles of proto-communism and toward greater justice and equality of opportunity. Today, since communism is still a bad word, those who want to achieve its goals but not claim its name have developed a new approach, which was identified as state capitalism in a special report by The Economist in 2012. In a nutshell, state capitalism is the practice of federal governments taking ownership and management control of otherwise private businesses Though the companies still operate in the private marketplace, they do so with inequitable backing of state and capital power. The idea behind state capitalism is inherently socialistic, in spite of the use of the word capitalism. The state rules by force. Tax revenues are given under compulsion, or you have to, foreclosing all other possible economic choices. At present, Russia, China, and other nations are committed to state capitalism, but so are many American leaders. Recently, for example, the U.S. federal government has made aggressive moves in the healthcare, energy, and banking sectors of the economy. Government control of the economy creates a significant justice issue because the government is so vulnerable to corruption. History professor Burton Folsom says the greatest corruption in American history came from government intervention in the economy, not from the free market. The Hoover Institution's Arnold Beichmann pointed out that socialism in the former Soviet Union, rather than distributing goods equally, actually created a class known as the nomenklatura, whose members own everything: the auto factories, the dakas, the food markets, the pharmacies, the transport system, the department stores, everything. In practice, Soviet created communism and used government force to take from the powerless to give to the powerful. Instead of achieving its stated goal of destroying class distinctions, socialism tends to remove competition and deposit cronyism. Cronyism is the appointment of friends and associates to positions of authority without regard to their qualifications. So it's putting your friends around you in a place of leadership. Milovan Dijal, we're just going with that, said the communist revolution conducted in